They wore the Mustang badge, but some of these cars nearly buried the legend. From bloated bodies to gutless engines and disco-era styling disasters, these 8 Mustangs became the brand's darkest chapters. They weren't just missteps, they were almost death sentences for America's pony car icon. Top 1, 1974 Mustang II, base. It was supposed to be the Mustang for a new generation. But what Ford delivered in 1974 looked more like a Pinto in a cheap suit. Gone were the long hoods, the raw engines, the muscle car swagger. Instead, buyers got a compact Mustang, too smaller, weaker, and almost unrecognizable. When the oil crisis hit in the early 70s, Ford panicked. Gas prices skyrocketed, insurance companies cracked down on performance cars, and the once mighty muscle market was collapsing. So Ford shrank its pony car, basing it on the Pinto platform. The design was boxy and restrained, with a stubby hood and plain lines that lacked the aggression buyers expected from a Mustang. Inside, things didn't get better. The Mustang II's cabin offered economy car plastics, cramped rear seating, and none of the sporty charisma that once defined America's favorite pony car. Under the hood, things got downright depressing. The 1974 base Mustang II came standard with a 2.3-liter inline-4, making a pathetic 88 horsepower. Barely enough to haul groceries, let alone challenge Camaros or Challengers. A 2.8-liter V6 was optional, but even that produced just 105 horsepower. 0 to 60, a glacial 13-15 seconds. Collectors today scoff at its specs, yet here's the twist. Over 385,993 Mustang IIs were sold in that first year alone, outselling nearly everything else on the road. It wasn't muscle, it was survival. The Mustang II kept the badge alive through one of the darkest periods in American performance history, but at a cost. Hardcore fans felt betrayed, accusing Ford of killing the Mustang spirit. Car magazines mocked it, drag racers ignored it, and collectors still treat it as the black sheep of the Mustang bloodline. Ironically, its massive sales meant the brand lived long enough to recover, but it forever scarred the legend. The '74 Mustang II may have stripped the Mustang of its soul, but Ford wasn't done making mistakes. Just a few years later, they dressed up this same platform with stripes and spoilers, trying to convince America it was still a muscle car. And that brings us to the curious case of the King Cobra. Top 2, 1978, Mustang II King Cobra. If the base Mustang II was a Pinto in a cheap suit, the King Cobra was that same Pinto dressed up for Halloween. It came with snake decals, a front air dam, and a rear spoiler, all screaming performance, but under the hood, the King wore no crown. By 1978, Ford realized the Mustang II was losing credibility fast. Buyers wanted flash, dealers wanted sales, and engineers had almost nothing left to give. The solution? Dress the Pinto platform Mustang in a costume loud enough to distract from its weaknesses. Enter the King Cobra, a special edition Mustang II loaded with visual aggression. It had wide tape stripes, a snake decal sprawled across the hood, flared fenders, and a front chin spoiler that suggested speed. Inside, drivers got bold color packages, rally gauges, and bucket seats, but the interior was still cramped and cheap compared to the Mustang's glory days. All show, no go. The King Cobra came with a 5-liter V8. Sounds promising, until you realize it made just 139 horsepower thanks to choking emissions equipment. That meant 0 to 60 in over 10 seconds and quarter-mile times in the mid-17s. Despite being Ford's performance flagship at the time, it was slower than some family sedans. Production was limited to just 4,971 units, making it rare today, but rare doesn't always mean respected. The irony is that its flashy looks fooled many buyers into believing they were buying a true performance Mustang. The King Cobra left a divided legacy. Some collectors now see it as a quirky time capsule, a symbol of the Malazer's desperation. Others mock it as the car that pretended to be something it wasn't, a muscle car in name only. Its rarity does make it a collectible curiosity, but few would argue it ever deserved the title King. What it did prove, however, was how close Ford came to completely losing the Mustang's identity. If the King Cobra was a wolf in stickers, the next Mustang misstep was a wolf that simply ate too much. Ford went big, too big, with the early '70s Mach 1, turning a once nimble pony into a heavyweight cruiser. and that mistake nearly crushed the brand even harder. Top 3. 1976 Mustang II Cobra II. Ford thought stickers could save the Mustang. Enter the Cobra IIa, car that promised track-ready venom but delivered little more than cosmetic stripes. If the King Cobra was over-the-top flash, the Cobra II was its cheaper sibling, trying to convince America that speed could be printed in vinyl. By 1976, the malaise era was in full swing. Emissions strangled horsepower, insurance premiums punished performance, and Detroit was scrambling for gimmicks. Ford's solution for the Mustang II? Borrow the look of Carroll Shelby's original Cobras without any of the engineering. Buyers could order the Cobra II with Lamont racing stripes, fake hood scoops, a rear spoiler, and quarter-window louvers. It was the Mustang II, dressed like a pro wrestler, intimidating at first glance, but flimsy once the bell rang. Inside, drivers were greeted by vinyl buckets and optional sport trim, but the cramped Pinto roots were impossible to ignore. Here's the catch: the Cobra II's most common engine wasn't even a V8. Many were sold with the base 2.3-liter four-cylinder, or the 2.8-liter V6. Even the performance option, the 302 V8, was choked down to just 140 horsepower. 0 to 60 took nearly 11 seconds. Quarter-mile runs dragged into the 18-second range, and handling was more about body roll than corner carving. Yet Ford moved over 25,000 Cobra IIs in 1976, proving just how effective stickers and nostalgia could be in tricking buyers. The Cobra II has become infamous among enthusiasts. To some, it's a rolling reminder of how low the Mustang had sunk, trading true performance for window dressing, but to collectors today, its absurdity gives it cult status. Spotting one at a show brings laughter, head shakes, and a weird sort of affection because it embodies the desperation of the mid-70s like no other Mustang. The Cobra II's role in nearly killing the brand was simple. It convinced the public that Mustang no longer stood for performance. But while the Cobra II was selling illusions, another Mustang was ballooning in size and weight so much that it stopped being a pony car altogether. The early 70s Mach 1 looked tough, but under the sheet metal, it was a lumbering giant that nearly dragged the nameplate into obscurity. Top 4. 1971 Mustang Mach 1. Big body. When the pony car grew too big for its own stable, it stopped being a pony. The 1971 Mustang Mach 1 looked like a muscle-bound bodybuilder, wide, heavy, and intimidating. But under the skin, it carried the kind of bulk that turned agility into a bad joke. Ford redesigned the Mustang in 1971 to chase a market obsessed with size and presence. The Mach 1's new body was nearly a foot longer and 5 inches wider than the 1965 original. It had a massive hood, deep front chin spoiler, NACA scoops, and fast-back lines that screamed performance. Inside, Ford offered high-back bucket seats, simulated wood trim, and an optional console, trying to keep pace with rivals like the Dodge Challenger and Chevrolet Camaro. On paper, it still looked like Detroit muscle at its peak. But here's the turn: weight killed the dream. Tipping the scales at over 3,800 pounds in some trims, the 71 Mach 1 was more boulevard cruiser than street predator. Even with engines like the 351 Cleveland or the 429 Cobra Jet, performance sagged. The 429 SCJ Super Cobra Jet made 375 horsepower, but with all that mass, it lumbered to 60 miles per hour in about 6.5 seconds. Respectable, but nowhere near the leaner Mustangs of the late 60s. Production numbers hit around 36,500 Mach 1s in 1971, showing Ford's gamble was popular, but it diluted the Mustang's identity. The big-body Mach 1 symbolized a turning point. Instead of being the nimble, affordable performance car that created the pony car craze, the Mustang had morphed into a heavyweight muscle coupe. Critics hammered it for abandoning the formula, while buyers slowly drifted towards smaller imports or true muscle monsters. Collectors today view it with mixed feelings. Striking in design, fascinating in history, but a cautionary tale of excess. Its very success in sales proved the problem. Ford mistook bulk for progress, nearly erasing the Mustang's essence. If the big Mach 1 was guilty of bloating the Mustang's size, the next misstep came in the form of a disappearing act. Because what happens when a Mustang sheds its roof not for performance, but for style, and ends up exposing just how fragile the brand had become? Top 5. 1973 Mustang Convertible. By 1973, the Mustang had lost its bite and the convertible was proof. What once symbolized freedom and raw American performance had been watered down into a soft-top cruiser, more about sunshine and leisure than quarter-mile dominance. The drop top became the moment when Mustangs stopped chasing glory and started chasing fashion. The 1973 Mustang Convertible was the last of the first generation before Ford shrank the car into the Mustang II. On the outside, it still had some muscle car cues, long hood, short deck, and a wide stance, but the lines were softened, chrome bumpers wrapped around federally mandated crash standards, and the car looked bulkier, heavier, less aggressive. Inside, buyers got vinyl bucket seats, faux wood grain, and a dash that felt more like a luxury sedan than a performance icon. The convertible top folded neatly, but the real heart of the car wasn't under the roof, it was what was missing under the hood. Engines had been neutered by emissions regulations and insurance crackdowns. The base 302 V8 made a paltry 140 horsepower. Even the top dog 351 Cobra Jet was rated at just 266 horsepower net. Performance was nothing like the Bosses or Shelbys from just a few years earlier. A quarter-mile time in the high 15s was the best most drivers could hope for. Production numbers tell the story too. Around 11,853 convertibles rolled off the line in 1973, but few cared about them as performance machines. They were boulevard cars, not backroad bruisers. The 73 convertible stands as the symbolic end of an era. By then, the oil crisis loomed. Regulations tightened, and the muscle car market was collapsing. Ford's once proud performance brand was fading into obscurity, with the convertible serving as its quiet surrender. Collectors today see them more as curiosities than icons, affordable classics that mark the turning point when Mustang traded horsepower for compliance. In a way, the 1973 convertible was both the last gasp of the old Mustang and the funeral bell that rang before the dreaded Mustang II arrived. Because if a weak convertible marked the brand's surrender to regulations, the next Mustang proved Ford could actually strangle its own legend. What happens when you take away not just power, but identity itself, turning the Mustang into something nobody asked for? Top 6, 1979, Mustang Ghia. The Mustang Ghia wasn't just a misstep, it was a betrayal in vinyl roof form. By 1979, Ford's pony car had morphed into something unrecognizable. Padded tops, opera windows, and wire wheel covers. This wasn't a performance car, it was a disco lounge on wheels. For enthusiasts, it felt like Mustang had sold its soul. The Ghia trim represented the height of luxury pretensions for the Mustang II and carried over into the early Fox body redesign of 1979. Built under Ford's partnership with Italian design house Ghia, the model emails Prius-sized plush appointments rather than raw muscle. Inside, velour seats, thick carpeting, and faux wood accents tried to convince buyers this was a European-inspired Grand Tourer. Outside, the optional vinyl Landau roof and wire-spoke hubcaps further distanced it from the street-fighting Mustang of the 1960s. Ford wasn't shy about marketing the Ghia as a sophisticated Mustang for executives and suburban families, but performance enthusiasts recoiled. Underneath the trim and badging lay the harsh reality. Standard power came from an anemic 2.3-liter inline 4 producing just 88 horsepower. Even the optional 302 V8 wheezed out a laughable 140 horsepower, barely enough to justify the Mustang name. 0 to 60 took over 10 seconds, quarter-mile times were embarrassingly slow, and any dreams of racing heritage were long gone. Production for the 1979 Mustang overall hit over 369,936 units, with a significant chunk being Ghia-trimmed coupes and hatchbacks. Instead of rare collector pieces, these cars became punchlines, time capsules, of a brand confused about what it wanted to be. The Ghia did more than just water down Mustang's performance reputation, it nearly severed the car's connection to its roots. As the 70s came to a close, the Ghia was the face of a Mustang that prioritized padded comfort over horsepower. Collectors today rarely chase them except as ironic examples of how far Ford was willing to wander from the original formula. For enthusiasts, the Ghia is a reminder that Mustang's survival often came at the cost of its identity. And if the Ghia showed how ridiculous a Mustang could look dressed for a masquerade ball, the next chapter proved something worse, when Ford decided to shrink-wrap the Mustang into shapes that made diehards wonder if the pony car even wanted to live anymore. Top 7. Mustang 1982 Mustang GT. By 1982, The Mustang had fallen so low that Ford tried to resurrect its street cred with three little letters: GT. On paper, it sounded promising, a return to glory, a revival of the muscle spirit, but peel back the stickers and stripes, and what you got was little more than theater without the thunder. Ford had learned from the embarrassment of the Mustang II. With the third-generation Fox body in place, the company desperately wanted to remind America that the Mustang still had muscle. The GT badge returned with bold graphics, blackout trim, and aggressive spoilers. It looked the part, with a squared-off face and sharper proportions that gave fans hope. Inside, the car traded plush disco vibes for driver-centered gauges, bucket seats, and sportier trim. For many buyers, just seeing the GT name back on a Mustang stirred nostalgia for the bosses and Mach 1s of the past. But the illusion cracked when you pressed the gas. The high-output 5-liter V8 was rated at just 157 horsepower, a number that, by muscle car standards, was laughable. The engine did offer more grunt than the base 4- and 6-cylinder Mustangs, but compared to the legendary big blocks of the 60S, it was a hollow echo. The quarter-mile times barely dipped into the 16-second range, slower than family sedans of just a few years earlier. Ford hyped the GT's return as a milestone, but enthusiasts saw through the disguise. It was a sheep in wolf's clothing, a marketing exercise wrapped in nostalgia. Production for the 1982 Mustang GT came in at roughly 19,000 units, making it far from rare, but certainly infamous. The 1982 GT marked both a low point and a turning point. On one hand, it revealed how fragile the Mustang brand had become, so desperate to claim muscle that it plastered badges on underpowered cars. On the other, it planted the seed for the rebirth of the true 5 Mustang that would dominate the late 80s. Today, the 82 GT has a cult following among Fox body fans, but it remains a symbol of how close Ford came to losing credibility entirely. If the 1982 GT was a wolf that couldn't bite, what came next showed Ford's struggle wasn't over, because by the late 90s, even when the Mustang had its swagger back, it still managed to stumble in ways that nearly cost the brand everything. Top 8, 1999 Mustang V6. The '99 Mustang should have been a celebration, the dawn of the new edge era, with sharp lines and bold styling. Instead, the V6 model turned that party into a punchline. Here was a Mustang that looked fast, sounded mean, and carried decades of heritage, but under the hood lurked the heart of a rental car. Ford redesigned the Mustang for 1999, with angular bodywork, creased fenders, and a more aggressive stance. From a distance, even the base V6 model looked like it belonged on a drag strip. Buyers could order flashy wheels, hood scoops, and spoilers, making it nearly indistinguishable from the GT at first glance. Inside, drivers got a modernized cabin with dual airbags, improved ergonomics, and slightly better materials than the aging '94-'98 models. Ford pitched it as a stylish, affordable way into Mustang ownership, something accessible for young drivers and commuters who wanted Mustang attitude without GT insurance rates. But looks can lie. The 3.8-liter Essex V6 made a modest 190 horsepower, paired with either a 5-speed manual or a slushy 4-speed automatic. That might sound passable until you remember the Mustang was supposed to embody performance. The V6 struggled to crack 0 to 60 in under 8 seconds and lumbered through the quarter mile in the mid-16s. Worse, Ford sold over 120,000 V6 Mustangs in 1999 alone, far outpacing GT sales. For an entire generation, the Mustang people most often saw on the streets wasn't a tire-smoking legend, it was a slow, underwhelming imposter wearing the same badge as the Boss 429. The 1999 V6 did more than dilute the brand, it reshaped its image. Suddenly, the Mustang wasn't feared, it was rented. Teenagers learned to drive in them, college students putt-putted around campus. Enthusiasts dismissed them as secretaries' cars, and collectors turned their backs. While the GT and Cobra carried the torch of performance, the sheer volume of V6 Mustangs left the brand vulnerable to mockery. Even today, when people joke about V6 Mustangs revving at stoplights, it's this car they picture. Even today, the 1999 V6 casts a long shadow. Its sharp, new edge looks promised speed, but its underpowered reality left an entire generation doubting the Mustang name. The irony? This car, meant to keep the Mustang alive, almost strangled it with its own mediocrity. The Mustangs survived these disasters by sheer stubbornness, outlasting boardroom blunders and marketing misfires that could have killed lesser brands. Each of these cars tells a cautionary tale, proof that even icons stumble when chasing trends over heritage. Yet, against the odds, the Mustang clawed back its reputation, proving resilience is part of its DNA. Today, collectors view these misfits with a mix of disbelief and fascination, reminders of how close the Mustang came to extinction. Which of these models do you think hurt the brand most? Let us know in the comments. Your take fuels the next revolution.